All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So welcome to another edition of In the News. Let's just jump right into it. Now, I have to start off with the clip of this plane where the engine is on fire. Like, literally, they were on the way to Hawaii. And as they took off, everything is fine and dandy. And then something goes wrong with the engine, and the engine gives out. From what I saw on the news, it was something about one of the propellers possibly breaking off and then tearing up everything else on the inside. And so that whole engine is just falling apart. And when you see the clip, you see flames, you see the shell of the engine has fallen off and everything. And mind you, it was kind of creepy because it was so quiet on the plane. I'm like, what flight are y'all on? But, fortunately, everything worked out. They were able to land the plane because, again, these planes are so advanced these days where they can literally take off and land with just one engine. But I still wouldn't want to be on a plane with only one engine because what if that one go out? But they were able to land safely. But the part that gets me the most is most of the people who were just on this flight, they hopped right on another plane a few hours later and go, continue on Hawaii. I was just like, y'all are better than me because I'm already scary when it comes to planes to begin with. But I just know if I would have been on a plane where the whole engine was on fire and we were, 20, 30,000 feet in the air, you don't have to worry about me getting on another plane for a while. I don't want to get on anything that moves at that point. Not a car, train, elevator, escalator. I don't even want to ride in the buggy at the grocery store like when I'm a kid. No, I'm good. I'm going to be a resident of whatever state we landed in. So if we landed in Wyoming, okay, I guess I live in Cheyenne now. That is what it is. Like, I am not. I'm good. I am a scaredy cat on planes sometimes, and it's crazy because I fly a lot. Maybe not recently because of COVID, but I get a decent amount of flying, and I'm not like paranoid where I think we're gonna die or nothing every single time. But it's something about when you hit that turbulence that just has me paranoid, and it's funny because I'll be on the plane and I always make sure I have like a really dope playlist because I like to be pleasantly distracted while I'm 37,000 feet in the air. I don't want to think about nothing because I'm one of those people who overthinks everything, especially in moments where you're not in control of anything. And like a plane is one of those spaces where you have no control over anything. You're just there and you're at the hands of, whoever's flying the plane and the technology that the plane has. And then sometimes when I'm on a plane, I get to thinking like, man, what if the pilot got divorced yesterday and they're ready to end it all with all of us on here? Like, man, I don't know. Like, I start thinking about too much stuff. I remember like one time I had to get on one of these flights. It was like a puddle jumper plane. I was so pissed. It was one of those planes that literally had It had only have like 16 seats, and there were only I think 6 or 7 of us on the flight, so they made us spread out and sit on certain sides so that the plane could be balanced. And then my over analytical self, I'm on one side, I'm looking at the person that's on the other side and like 2 rows in front of me. Now they have at least 200 pounds on me, so I was like, y'all need to bring like 2 more people on my side because in my head I just felt like we're gonna take off and just turn. I'm like, nope, you need like 2 or 3 more people on my side because I don't weigh enough. Like, we gotta balance it out. Y'all said balance, right? This is not balance. Like, I'm one of those people. And so, I normally have to put on like some music or something just to kind of stay entertained because I don't even want to hear sounds on the plane. I don't like when I hear the engine slow down because automatically in my head I think the plane is turning off. When it does that, choo, I'm like, wait a minute, hold up, what's going on? And I'm one of those people too. I think I said this in one of my comedy shows once. Like, listen, when the plane get too wild, I switch the playlist to gospel real quick. I can be listening to the most ratchet playlist, the most turn up everything, and as soon as we hit 2 or 3 bumps, the way I switch it over to gospel, and not just like the 2021, new age Christian center stadium gospel. No, I want like the deep fried down home gospel where you can smell the fish cooking in the basement while service is still going on. I want that conviction kind of gospel. Like, give me that. Like, I'll put that stuff on just to kind of calm my nerves. Like, man, I'm on the planes paranoid. And so I don't know how they were able to do it. And then when I was watching the story, like, one of the women who were on the plane, she was talking about how, she was sitting next to her mother and they saw everything wrong with the engine. So they were like, we just closed the shade and we just prayed and hoped. I'm like, I don't want to close the shade because, no, I need to see if the flame is going to start moving up the wing and if I need to go to the other side. Like, I was paranoid just watching it on the news. So, that's funny. I don't know. It's just, some of that is me just being obsessed with being in control sometimes because that's why I think I'm still terrified of earthquakes as well because they kind of just show up. You don't get any kind of warning. At least a tornado, as terrible as they are, you get a few minutes of a warning where you can kind of somewhat think of what you need to do or where you need to go and take shelter. Or even a hurricane, you got a few days to map it out. You got enough time to pack up and U-Haul and everything. But earthquakes just kind of show up. They don't even ask. They just like, what's up? You just got over your fear of heights and you're on your first roller coaster. And as soon as you get to the top, then here's an earthquake. What's up? I'm like, I can't. So, I'm glad it worked out for those people, but Yeah, I can't, like, man. And I'm one of those people where, for some reason, like, whenever I have to get on a plane, for some reason, it seems like everything that comes on the TV a few days before is all the TV specials, how planes crash, mega air disasters. I'm like, okay, too much. And it's funny because if you've ever like flown into DC, one of the funniest things is like if you fly into Reagan National, everybody knows that when you approach, you come in from that Virginia side, like through Alexandria, and so you're over the Potomac, and you don't even see the tarmac until you're about 100 feet from the ground. So it looks like you're going to land in water every time. And so I'm just like, all right, okay. And don't let it be a windy day. But that's funny. Planes just have me a little paranoid sometimes. Like I try, like, I guess my way to deal with it is I just keep my eyes on the flight attendant. As long as the flight attendant is cool, I'm cool. And it's funny because sometimes them planes are terrible. And, the planes are just calm. And the flight attendants are just calm. And they're, pushing the cart. And would you like a Sprite? And I'm like, okay, as long as they're good. But listen, the minute the flight attendants lose it, I'm losing it. Because I'm sorry. I don't care how much training you have. Once you find out that you about to drop 38,000 feet, ain't no training in the world. That's life and death. I'm sorry. Plus, that's a long, slow death, too. That's a 3-minute drop. Like, so, as long as the flight attendants are cool, I'm cool. And then the other thing, I don't know if you saw like the clips of, some of the debris that fell from the plane, and like fortunately it didn't hit anybody. Like, it was a miracle. It missed everybody's homes and stuff. But I saw the piece of like the engine shell sitting in the person's yard. I was like, those people are better than me, because the way I would have been up under some of that debris by the time the news cameras came. Just, I'd play that off. Make sure I get my check, and I might have had to break something or two. Break like a pinky finger or something. Just to kind of add some spice to it, so it's a little bit more believable. I'd try to break like an arm or a leg, but I might do it wrong and then mess up something and you get a blood clot to go to your brain and kill you. So, yeah. But jeez, there's gonna be some lawsuits with that, especially with the people who have any kind of property where things fell. I know I would milk that. I'm not even gonna lie. Like, it reminds me of when I was a kid. The monorail in Seattle caught fire this one time. And the funniest thing, now everybody was fine, of course, and the people had to get out via like a ladder all the way down. But there's this clip of this woman who's in the grass. Now, mind you, the portion of the monorail car that she was on, there was no fire, there was no smoke anywhere near her. But she was in that grass with like a whole oxygen thing. Just I was like, she's selling it. Like, she was already building her case just in case. And, but man, yeah, flying is. And I have to go to Chicago in like 2 months. So I'm like, dang, I gotta get on a plane already. So yeah, hopefully I just have to make sure I have a really good playlist. Like, man, because I told y'all I'm paranoid on the planes. But that's funny. I'm glad everything worked out for those people. But man, it's a good thing that it happened like while they were still, overland and not too far from where they took off. Because once you get over that water, especially going from the West Coast to Hawaii, like I think from Seattle to Hawaii is like 6 hours. And so, had that have happened, 2 or 3 hours into the flight over the water, there's no telling what could happen. So it's a good thing that everybody's fine. But I don't even like flying over water now that I think about it. Like, when I was a kid, when we moved to Italy, TWA Flight 800, it had just blew up a few months earlier. So I'm already paranoid. I'm thinking everything's going to go wrong with the plane. Mind you, I'm like 7 or 8 years old. And they had put Toy Story on the plane for the kids to watch. I couldn't even enjoy the movie. I was stressed. Every time we hit a bump, I'm looking. Just paranoid. I'm working on it. Just work with me, okay? That's a journey. I'm not afraid of a whole lot of things, but earthquakes and airplanes, sometimes I start thinking too much. That's just a long drop. That's a long drop. Anyway, moving on. And then in regards to Ted Cruz, before I even get into Ted Cruz, I will say, in relation to Texas, one, I'm glad that the weather has warmed up and things are starting to look up for some of the residents. Many of the residents have gotten their power back. There's still some pockets where people don't have electricity, and there's still a lot of pockets where people don't have running water. And so the people of Texas have gone through it for the past few days. You know what I mean? Everything from people freezing to death, people having carbon monoxide poisoning because they're trying to find ways to stay warm, people having water damage where the pipes are bursting and destroying the ceilings, people's homes catching fire because either the gas lines are acting crazy or something with the electrical wiring. And so the people have dealt with a lot. You know what I mean? And so you would think that the leadership would respect that and ensure that those who are going through any kind of hardship, that you go and you adhere to what those needs are of the people. It's one of the reasons why I also was kind of side-eyeing a lot of the people who were kind of mocking what was happening in that region, saying, they don't know how to act when snows here, blah, 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 or, dang, all these houses in Texas must be cheaply built. I'm like, listen, if a pipe bursts, and it's a pipe that's sitting in the ceiling, it doesn't matter whether you're in Dallas or Brooklyn, it's gonna have the exact same reaction, okay? All that plaster is coming down, so relax. But yeah, so some people were really kind of tacky with how they approached it. But going back, the conversations around the leadership and just what is in power, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And then even seeing the different people who now have these electric bills that are $16,000 and $17,000 because of, just some kind of loopholes or whatever happens with how they do the billing and so on and so forth. I'm just like, this is wild. So with all that being said, you would think that the leadership, like I said, they're supposed to come into that role and do what they, campaigned on doing. But then you got somebody like Ted Cruz who, he decided he was going to Mexico. I'm just going to go to Mexico. And what got me with all of that is, after you get caught doing the wrong, then you got to backtrack. And then instead you blame it on everybody except for yourself. Well, my daughter, she wanted to go to Mexico. I'm like, you know what? You gonna blame it on the kids. I don't know what kind of household he lives in, but I just know growing up, my brother and I did not get to call the shots about anything in our house. It didn't matter how much we voiced our opinions or what we wanted. What mom and dad said, that's what went. And you mean to tell me that your daughter is the one who said, well, we going to Mexico, so let's go pack up. And you done packed up and went to Mexico with all them bags. Just crazy. Like, I think it back, we never got to just say, Mom, we want to go to Disney World, let's go. Yeah, we get a trip to the car to pick up the groceries out the back of the trunk. And you better put the groceries up right, okay? Get cussed out if you do that wrong. I know my brother gets pissed every time he thinks about the time he put the breakfast sausage in the freezer. And then there was no sausage to eat in the morning. Yo, my mom was hot because, like, my mom, she doesn't eat a lot of things. Like, she doesn't eat, like, eggs or grits or nothing like that. So she literally, out of the breakfast food, she only eats, like, the meats and, like, she'll eat, like, a biscuit. So that morning, all she had was a biscuit. And then I think one of us forgot to tell her that we ran out of honey or jelly or something, so she just had to eat it dry. The way we got cussed out in that house. But anyway, back to the topic, I'm like, you gonna blame it on the daughter. But it's funny watching him have to go back, like looking stupid in the airport, lying. Oh, I just went to drop them off. It's like, you did not fly all the way to Mexico to be there for one day to drop them off. They didn't need dropping off. Like, relax. So I don't know what kind of household they have. Because one, I still can't get over him letting the former president call his wife ugly. And he did nothing about it. And mind you, this happened before Donald Trump was president. So this is before Secret Service. If Ted really wanted to, he could have pulled up. But he didn't. So I'm confused about that. But, like, you remember, like, Trump literally posted a picture on top of it just to kind of push his claim a little bit more. And I'm like, what kind of marriage do you have where you let some man call your wife ugly? And not only that, but post a picture of it for the whole world to see as evidence. And then you sitting there riding behind him. Kind of foolery. I don't know what kind of household they live in. But seeing the pictures of him having to walk back through the airport, I'm like, now you look stupid. You just look stupid. Have you ever done something really foolish and you gotta backtrack? It's like the most embarrassing experience. Like, I remember I was a sophomore in high school and I cussed out this substitute teacher, lit into her, and really it wasn't even over anything serious. I think I just had an audience, and so I fed off of, the adrenaline in the audience, and all the attention was on me, and I showed my behind, showed out. I had all the jabs, just going in, whole class laughing. Fortunately, I didn't get suspended, but I did have to get like 2 referrals, and I think I had a few detentions. But the gotcha is that she ended up becoming my chemistry teacher the next year. And man, I was so nice to her. Hey, good morning, how you doing? Like, because at that point I knew that I wanted to go away for college, and I wanted to, I had a list of schools, so I was like, I can't be messing up now. And so I was taking school so serious, and I'm like, what, all that foolery of the year before, now I gotta kiss a whole bunch of behind to make sure that she doesn't remember that I'm that student that told her about herself. I forgot what I said to her, it was something out of pocket. But, Ted, like, what are you doing? And then, just people were saying, well, what was he supposed to do? He can't go and turn the power on, or he can't stop the cold weather from coming. And really, it's a conversation about optics. You know what I mean? Like, it's optics. If you're in a position of leadership and the people are depending on you, you're the one calling the shots. People expect you to be in the trenches with them when something is going wrong, especially something that is statewide. It's not saying you got to freeze and die, but, the idea of going to Mexico, of all places, to, vacation resort. Like, it doesn't look right. It's almost like, I was watching this on there's a YouTube channel I really like called, I think it's called Sunbright Films. I think I've referenced that channel a few times, but I love that channel because they always have some really great, like, documentary type material. But there's an episode on there that talks about this cruise ship called, like, the Oceanos, right? And so it's this cruise ship that's off the coast of Greece somewhere. They hit this bad storm, right? And so the storm is so bad, the ship, I don't know what happens, but the ship starts taking on water, right? And the ship is starting to sink. And so the captain, guess who's one of the first people off the ship when they start, doing the airlifts up out of there? Captain Ben off the ship, all right? He done ditched and tipped out. And so literally the people who ended up making sure that everybody got off the ship safely, it was the entertainment crew. The people that are, the house band that are singing a little, dum, 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 dum. It was that crew. It was them and the band and the singers. They were able to safely, keep everybody alert and give the announcements using the PA system and keep everybody calm. And okay, the ships are here and you guys are going to go this way. And if you're this tall, you're going to get on this ship. And, It was them that got everything all together. And then when everybody's safely off the ship and they start questioning the captain, like, yo, why did you leave the ship? He gonna go and say, well, I mean, I said abandon ship, so you gotta get off. It is what it is. I'll just play the clip for reference.
When I order abandon the ship, doesn't matter what time I leave. Abandon is for everybody. If some people they like to stay, they can stay.
Listen, if I would have been on dry land after I got off that ship, he would have caught it. What you mean if we wanted to get off? The nerve. Okay, that's about as bad as, what was the other ship? What was it? It was in Italy. Costa Concordia, I think. That's the one where the captain was driving the ship and he was trying to impress the women on the coastline. He took the whole cruise ship too close to land. It scuffed up some rocks and then the ship started, tilting and getting ready to capsize. And then when he's on the phone with, rescue and calling for help, they discover he's not even on the ship anymore. He done been got off the ship. He's on land watching the ship go down. Yeah, we gonna need some help. Yeah, it's looking pretty bad. You done had all them people die, and it's not saying die on the ship, but as being in a position of leadership, when people are entrusting you, with not only their safety but their well-being, you are supposed to lead by example and make sure that in that realm, unfortunately, you have to lead by example, and so everybody else is supposed to be your priority, not yourself. And then that was the funny part with the other guy. He was saying that he could be more of a help with the rescue from being off the ship. That was the Oceanos guy. I'll be a better help from land watching while the ship going down. I can tell them what to do. Sir, you ain't in no cruise control rescue helicopter nothing. That ain't your lane. You don't know what to tell them people to do. Relax. But yeah, so just Ted, I can't just. Everybody, y'all got some weird leadership over there. Because even Rick Perry, when he was saying the line about, well, Texans are willing to suffer so that regulation doesn't come in and take over, and he started spewing out some crap about what the left and some other crap was doing. I'm like, that's not how this works. When reality hits, all them politics go out the window. When people are in need, they're gonna get help from wherever it can come from. When it's a conversation of life and death, and because you've seen people literally die, you still want to make this a conversation about politics and the left and the right and the Republicans and the Democrats and what Biden didn't do and what Trump did. Foolery. So yeah, Ted Cruz, that's a joke. And then, folks are losing their minds about the dog being left. Now, from what I understand, I think there was a trainer or somebody that was still there. So I was like, you know what? This is the time that the harp on that if you running for office, because when it comes to white folks and dogs, that you can lose an election over a dog. So y'all better handle it. For those of you who decide to run, he's up for re-election in 2024. Goodness, what a joke. Anyway, moving on. You know what? I got some more to say, Ted Cruz. No, I'm just kidding, but that's just crazy. You done did all that foolery, and then here you go 859 days later trying to do a photo op passing the residents some water. Like they needed the water when you were in Mexico. Goodness, and those pictures are funny because it's like he knew the camera was on him. Like, get me. Here you go. Get me. I'm putting my arms around one of the people. It's going to be okay. I'm like, oh, these politicians, they play in our faces so much. It's just ridiculous. But moving on, some folks were asking me my 2 cents about Kim and Kanye. I'll be honest, I don't follow them enough to be really invested in their whole journey. But I will say, I knew something was fishy in the water when Kanye was campaigning and he told that story about Kim wanting to not have that last child and, him fighting her as far as her not getting an abortion and so on and so forth. I was like, oh, that's not something you share with the world. So clearly something's going on in that household. But, I never really saw them as a couple that was in love and wanted to grow old together. For me, it came off more so just like a status relationship where there's something to be gained by being together. And I think when you have some celebrities that are so big, where their brand is so big, it's hard for them already to find somebody to really settle with, because it's hard to find someone who can align with your experience in that realm of being a celebrity, and not just any celebrity, but a huge one. And so I think, if anything, they were in love with the idea of being in love with who the person was. I think Kim was in love with the idea of being with a Kanye West because he was this big time rapper who has a whole machine, and Kanye's in Kanye land. And I think for Kanye, the same thing, in love with the idea of being with a Kim Kardashian who has her own machine and she's in Kim land. And so you have these two machines that just don't quite work together. And so hopefully they're able to peacefully co-parent. But I think you see that a lot of times in politics as well. I think there's a lot of people in politics who are married that really are not in love and really probably can't stand each other, but for the benefit of what they can become and what they can gain later down the line, they're together. So I don't know. I always felt that with Bill and Hillary, to be honest. I just felt like I never saw the loving thing that you see couples do. I didn't see it with those two, but who am I to judge? And then when it comes to the backlash that Meek Mill is receiving in response to a song where he references the helicopter crash that killed Kobe Bryant, as well as other people, including his daughter, one, I don't know who thought that was a good idea. That was just all in poor taste, or just all the way around. That I don't even know who was like, oh, this is gonna hit right here. Like, no, that did not. And I know folks are gonna say, oh, well, it's hip hop. You can get as grimy as you want. There's no rules to this game. It is what it is. That's just charge it to the game. Okay, fair assertion, but at the same time, you can't get mad at the backlash that comes in. You can't get mad at people being offended, because at the same time, all of this just happened a year ago. You know what I mean? And even if it happened 20 years ago, it's still going to have that same energy, because that entire situation is just a tragedy all around. You know, not only was he killed in a helicopter crash, but he was killed, you know, actually going and doing something in the community, coaching the kids' basketball team. And in addition to that, you have all of these people who pass away. You have the media who gets a hold of the story before the family can even be notified. And so people have found out that their relatives have died because of TMZ or other news outlets or the internet or the news and everything like that. And then you also have first responders and police taking pictures of the body and trying to sell it to paparazzi. Like, there's a lot of hurt surrounding that entire story. So that's just something you don't need to reference at all. And, you know, a lot of times you'll see up-and-coming rappers kind of hop on that kind of train where they try to do something just so outrageous it'll get people talking. I don't understand why Meek needed to do that, because everybody knows who Meek is. You know what I mean? Everybody knows Meek. And so it's kind of like, you know, you didn't even have that kind of energy for Drake when you let Drake, of all people, fry you up. So how you going to bring out the big guns for somebody who's not even alive? Like, it just, that was just all in poor taste. And so I was just like, come on. And it's no disrespect to Drake or anything, but it's kind of like everybody knows Drake is kind of a cornball. He makes great music, but he's kind of cheesy. You know, he's kind of a everybody's kind of guy. And so it's like, you let Drake, of all people, drag you when y'all are beefing. But now you want to bring out the most vicious lines you can think of in response, and you're utilizing people who are no longer even here. And it was so bad that, you know, his widow had to make a statement and say, you know, you can find other ways to, you know, put out your art. And of course, he said he apologized to her privately. I'm kind of like, your apology needs to match the energy of the offense. So if you're going to apologize, you know, for a song that you did, you at least do a remix and apologize on a remix or something. Don't be doing no private phone call. Apologize to the public the same way you put the song out there. That's all I got to say. But, you know, we'll see how that unfolds. You see how the lighting just changes once the sun goes down. The next person, you know, I got a few more people I want to drag. So can I start with Marco Rubio, because I've been meaning to get him too. And so, as you know, there's been a lot that's happened collectively around the country in response to COVID. And even before COVID, the economy was already all over the place to begin with. And you've continued to see that gap expand between the rich and the poor. And you've also seen the lack of empathy from a lot of the people who are in charge in regards to the experience that many Americans are, you know, pretty much facing when it comes to just being able to pay their bills. You have so many people who, one, no matter how hard they work, because of whatever field they work in, or the cost of living, or just whatever's happening in life, they're never in a position where they can really break even just at the end of the month. It's still a challenge. They're still in the red. They still got to use their credit card to balance out something to pay off one bill, and that bill is racking up. Or they got college loans that they're trying to figure out how to pay off, and so on and so forth. And so the issue that I keep having is, one, I'm seeing so many people in power who just lack empathy, but then they also latch on to the idea of, oh, I'm a Christian, I'm an evangelical, this, that, and the third. But the policy never matches. It never matches what it is that they believe. The only time they want to latch on to anything in religion is when they can say what you can't do. That's the only thing, you know, it's always going to be what you're not allowed to do in regards to their religious beliefs. But when it comes to the aspect of charity, or the aspect of ensuring that the people are well-to-do, all of that goes out the window. And then they jump onto this attitude about, oh, you got to work hard, and they never go into the context and the origins of what that really means, or even they don't even really reflect on where people are in society and what those words mean and how they actually connect, and whether or not they do connect, and whether or not they're even, you know, if it's even a part of reality for some people's experience. And so he made this tweet yesterday where he says, and this is all about, I think this is in the COVID relief bill, I think, where they want to start sending, you know, additional money to people who have children. And so he says, sending $250 or $350 per month per child to everyone with no work requirement is welfare. Being pro-family means being pro-work. Our expanded child tax credit idea is a far better approach. One, in regards to any kind of conversation about tax credit, I don't want to hear it, because what they did, they already lied and sold everybody a dream with that bootleg tax cut from 2017, where, again, if you make under a certain amount of money, you've already noticed your taxes are going to go up this year, next year, and the year after, and the year after, up until 2027. So one, save that with the tax cuts, because we know who that really is for. You know, it's so funny when that first tax cut came in 2017, and they said, oh, well, you know, now people can go and remodel their kitchen, because apparently they were going to have an extra $1,500 in their bank account, when in reality, you know, the government was just withholding, you know, a little bit less in taxes that you were still going to have to pay back at the end. But, you know, go ahead and remodel your whole kitchen for $1,500. I mean, that's like a refrigerator and half of a stove, but okay. Anyway, and so with that, I just want to get into this conversation, because what I've seen is the conversations around welfare are always so negative, and it's always put in this position of, oh, well, the people who are on it just, they don't work. They're lazy. They suck at everything. But I want to kind of go back and dissect, because to be honest, that was not always the viewpoint of people who were on welfare, first of all. Secondly, the other thing I also want to say is I would love for America to free itself from the two-party system, because I feel like that's one of the reasons why things are so stagnant. It's always going to be an us versus them conversation. It's going to be Republican versus Democrat, going to be, you know, left versus right, blah, 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 blah. And you have people who literally latch on to their affiliation through whatever party they're in. And it doesn't matter what the policy is. They're going to align with what their party wants. It doesn't matter at the expense of who, and even if it's something that they don't believe in, they don't care. And so now, again, I think you're seeing the worst of it in the last maybe 15, 20 years, as far as Democrat and Republicans going at it with whatever, where a lot of times there's no policy being put into play. There's nothing that's actually being done for the people, because it's a conversation of a power grab and who can be in control of what. And so it's a seesaw. It's back and forth. One party gets in power, they do a little something. The other party gets in power, they undo what they did. And then it's time to switch up, and then they get back in power and they switch and undo. And it's a seesaw. And I feel like America's been in this seesaw for decades at this point. But going back to the conversation of welfare, because one, I'm tired of people being vilified for being in the predicaments that they're in, when in reality, America is not the same America that existed just 70 plus years ago. You know what I mean? And so now you're in a space where even people who are poor, that think they're rich, you know, they think they're wealthy, they think they're middle class, but they're poor. You know, they're one paycheck away from struggling like the next person. Honestly, sometimes they're 2 paychecks ahead of struggling like the next person. It's just stuff hasn't cleared in the bank yet, but it's coming. You know what I mean? And so now you have people who are literally poor fighting against the people who are even more poor, because they're in a battle for the limited resources that exist. And what's happening is people who have this mindset and idea that, oh, well, because I work hard, I deserve more, as if the people who may be not making the same amount aren't working. There's this idea that, oh, you know, I'm doing so much, so you must not be doing enough. And so now we're in a space where you have the poor fighting the poor. And who are the main people leading the conversations? The rich. Rubio, perfect example, because it's kind of like, I don't want to hear a conversation about working hard, when in reality, like, first of all, you're in Congress. Yeah, I don't do anything. All the people in Congress are on vacation all year. They work like 3 months out of the year, and then every time when we really need them for something that's going on, what do they always skip town. They stay skipping town when it's time to vote on something important, or they skip town. They'll come back into session in 6 weeks. I'm like, you know what? And do you know how hard it is to live in DC and see that? Because you know that a lot of these people just live down the street. You know, they'd be somewhere in Virginia or Maryland somewhere. I'm like, you know what? If I could, the way I would show up at some people's house, let me knock on the door. I got some questions for you. But, you know, so it's chaotic. But getting back to the main point that I want to say, like, there are hidden elements of racism. I was coming to it. There are hidden elements of racism in those conversations when we talk welfare, because in all honesty, you know, we now know in the United States that they've pretty much made Black Americans the face of welfare. But that was not always the case. Black Americans were never the face of welfare until 1965. We'll get to that in a second. So when you go back to the initial origins of something like a welfare, you know, again, the purpose of welfare in general is to give people an extra boost. And so initially, you know, we're coming out of the Great Depression, right? It's been some rough times. People are really going through it. That's pretty much what signals, okay, we need to do something to help the people. And the only reason that became a thing is, again, the conversation of American exceptionalism. America wanted to put on this front to the rest of the world that the United States was the greatest of the greatest. And you know, when you come here, you will be prosperous, and, you know, everything just aligns in this magical land of America. So you have to live here, and if you live here, you're privileged, and it's the greatest experience ever. And no other country is free, and no other country has what we have, because we are the best. And so all of that goes out the window if everybody's poor. So, okay, boom, here comes the idea of welfare. And so there's a few groups that it's pretty much, you know, that are the face of it. So one, of course, white Americans in general, but also white women, mainly because you had a lot of white women that were also widows. And I say that because, you know, just a decade and some change before the Great Depression, you had the ending of World War I, and you had a lot of women lose their husbands in the war. But also, there's never a conversation about how many people pretty much lost it mentally by the time they came home. because that is the war of the trenches, where everybody was in the trenches and, everything's exploding and shooting and so on and so forth. And a lot of people had some serious PTSD when they got home, where they never mentally recovered. They weren't able to work. They weren't able to do anything. And this is the era where a lot of times this is still the one income household where women didn't work a lot of times. And so now you have to find a way, how can you help and take care of a lot of the women who have husbands that can no longer work, or they're widowed, or, the husband has been, what's the phrase I'm trying to think of? When a husband has been committed. And so all of that happens, right? And so welfare at the point in time was looked at as, oh, it's the great American government helping the people. It's the great American government, again, being the stellar, exemplary government that they are. Giving people the support that they need. Giving people everything that they can to be prosperous and live in the grand land of the free and the home of the brave, all that crap, right? And so that happens. And then fast forward, of course, you get things like the New Deal and stuff that happens later down the line. And so, all is well in America. Now, mind you, everybody's on this system. Everybody. All groups have been affected, okay? And of course, at that moment in time, white people were a little bit more prioritized in regards to receiving welfare. And so all of that's happening. What happens by the time we get to 1965? Well, in addition to the whole COINTELPRO thing, you watch a lot of black prominent figures become assassinated or get killed. And so you've seen, at this point, Malcolm X has been killed, and you've seen things like the Watts riots, and there's been a bunch of different riots and uprisings in a lot of cities, specifically in black neighborhoods where black Americans are just tired of a lot of things that are happening. In addition to, you also have the civil rights movement still going on, you have the black liberation movement going on, and the black nationalist movement going on, and all of these different things. And so what happens is the narrative starts to change. And even within the media, people are like, oh no, it's those out of control black people in those neighborhoods tearing down things, because again, they just don't know how to have anything. They're just out of control, and they're just, they are just, I don't know what's going on with those people. And so in addition to that, you also have what you call the war on crime, which is pretty much started by Nixon, and then that's pretty much expanded into the war on drugs when you get Reagan in there. And so now it's gone from a situation where, okay, welfare is something where we can help the great Americans become even greater, because that's what we do as a country. We're going to make sure that everybody eats. Now it's turned into, well, the reason America can't be great is because them black folks keep burning down their neighborhoods, and they're doing drugs, and they're violent, and they're criminals. And then you throw in the extra stereotypes of black people being lazy and so on and so forth, and then you add in a little sprinkle of the media kind of propaganda type stuff, and you get those phrases that are coined by certain presidents like Reagan, like terms like welfare queen, so on and so forth. And then the narrative changes to something where people are rigging the system. It's a whole bunch of black folks that are just collecting a check, and they're not even trying anymore, and the father's not in the house, and so on and so forth. Kind of like if you remember seeing the movie Claudine. That's a perfect example. Or even Gladys Knight and the Pips, the song Mr. Welfare Man. Perfect example. Go back and look at the lyrics of Mr. Welfare Man. It tells the whole story. But and so after 1965, the narrative and the image has changed. And so since 1965 and onward, and then of course you get the heroin epidemic, and you also get the crack epidemic, and so on and so forth, the imaging has shifted, and for some reason, there's this assumption that welfare is something that only black people utilize. And black people are doing it because they're lazy, they don't work hard, they don't have family values, because all the fathers are in jail. Mind you, the system put all the fathers in the jail, but the fathers aren't in the jail, so there's no family structure, and it's just all over the place. Those people just, they don't work hard. And so America bought into that theory, and is perfectly fine accepting that, because again, when we talk about the idea of America, and I think I said this on the last video, but when people see the idea of America, they see white anyway. America, like I said before, is a very white country. It doesn't matter how diverse it is. The heart of this country is white. The government of this country is white. The laws that are enforced are enforced through a lens of whiteness. And so having something like welfare be put in the image of black Americans is perfect, because again, it doesn't really compromise that idea of American exceptionalism. Well, America's great, and yeah, we know a few of them people over there are on welfare, but that doesn't represent the rest of us. The rest of us, we're doing what we're supposed to. And so now we get here. And so the problem with that is it's like a false reality, because in all fairness, America at this point is in the dumps. It has been for years, especially with the economy. And as you've seen that gap grow wider between the rich and the poor, and mind you, I haven't even really jumped into race and the structural laws that kind of separate races, and when it comes to the wealth gap and things like redlining, I didn't even get to that. But again, when you just kind of talk about where America is as a country, the people have been hurting. And the fact is, when you go back and you think about what initially triggered the idea of welfare, it was because the country was coming out of a Great Depression and things were moving too slow. People were hurting. People weren't able to make ends meet. And so fast forward to 2021, what are we in? We're in, one, a pandemic, and two, a recession that has transformed into a depression. And then the same system that we once used, some decades back, all of a sudden, it's something where unacceptable. And so you're watching all of these politicians who just have no empathy for anybody, who have no real grasp of reality, continue to latch on to talking points that are dated and hold on to ideals and viewpoints that no longer relate to where America is in 2020. And so when, again, we talk about that idea of American exceptionalism, a lot of these people who are in power are still holding on to viewpoints that existed in the 50s and 60s. They're holding on to an America that they remember seeing as children, or that their parents remember, living in, and we haven't been there for years. And so right now, how I see the United States is, it's a country that's operating with the mindset of 1950, but doing it in 2021. And it just doesn't work. And so that's why I'm just like, you see the denial. And it's almost like, how do I explain this? It would almost be like if you had an NBA game, right? And let's say you have one team that represents the countries in the world that have advanced, okay? Because again, I think the reason why so many people are so pressed about the 1950s and early 60s is because, yes, America was ahead of its time with a lot of technology and advancements and opportunities and so on and so forth for white people, because black folks, we were getting sprayed by hoses at the time, or we were getting our little girls blown up in churches or lynched or whatever else was going on. But, for white Americans at the time, life looked really great. And again, like we said before, what was happening? We had just come out of World War II. A lot of our competition as far as economic prosperity, a lot of those countries were all blown up in bits and pieces, and they were trying to rebuild and restructure. And so America had a monopoly on a lot of things at that moment in time because there was no competition. And so people were able to prosper, so on and so forth. And you had programs like the GI Bill. And again, we've already talked about the FHA programs and so on and so forth. It gave a head start to a lot of people who looked a certain way, right? And so people hold on to those viewpoints and hold on to that memory, and the country's not doing that anymore. The way that the tax codes have changed and the programs have been cut and gutted and shifted and so on and so forth, half of that stuff doesn't even exist in the same realm that it exists in anymore. And so people still want Americans to latch onto this idea of working hard to be great, when in reality, the hardest working people in this country are the people who don't have anything. And so, again, America's operating with this exceptionalism idea that existed in the 50s and 60s and trying to use that as the standard of 2021. So going back to my little NBA example, today, the difference with 2021 versus 1950 or 1960 is we're not the only people on the court anymore, right? There's other countries that have been able to advance and develop and find ways to take care of their citizens, so on and so forth. And so now you have a plethora of different countries that are all doing different things. And you watched America's ranking just continue to drop down in education and health and literacy and all kind of different things. And so it's literally like watching a basketball game. And let's just say that the countries that are a little bit more advanced at the moment or have their stuff together a little bit, they still have their flaws. But, pretty much when it comes to the residents of that country, being well off, they're doing way better than we are. Pretend that team is composed of some of the greatest of the moment. LeBron and Curry and Irving and all of them. All of them are on, one team. And then for the United States, we're going to get all the legends, all the greats, like Sam Jones and who else? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Russell and Cassie Russell. Did I tell y'all he eulogized my grandma? By the way, he's a preacher now. When my grandma passed, he did her funeral. I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. But, so all of those greats who have won all kind of NBA titles and have records, especially like a Bill Russell, who has a record that I don't think anybody's ever going to break. It would be like putting them on the court to play each other. But the catch is that the team of the legends, they're going to be the age that they are in 2021, not in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. Oh, no. So these are the players. They're all in their 70s and 80s. And as great as they are, and for all of the accomplishments that they were able to do in their heyday and for the legacies that they have created, that is all fine and dandy. But the way that Father Time works, those knees are not connected in the same way. The hips are getting thrown out. People got arthritis. People got gout, back problems, everything. They can probably still play very well. But you can't put them on a court and expect them to play the way that they did back in the 50s and 60s against this new breed of players that are doing what they do in 2021. That's how I look at the United States. When it comes to governing the people and what they're doing, they're holding on to the memories of the 50s and the 60s and trying to utilize it in a system that does not really work well in 2021. and then weaponizing it against the people. And so you've watched wages never really go up in the last few decades. You've watched the cost of living skyrocket. You've watched the cost of education just be unbearable to pay. And then you watch people who try to get an education. Now they're locked into a whole bunch of debt and everything else like that. And it's just like when you see the experiences of some people, like you take a social worker, they have to go through all of that schooling just to still be broke and still owe on all kind of loans. And when you want to talk about working hard, I mean, some of these people who are social workers have 12, 13, 14-hour days. They're going house to house doing what they do. People who work at a grocery store, this is probably the worst time to work at one during a pandemic, because every single time something happens in the media and people get scared, folks flock to the grocery store. And you've seen the worst in people, where people won't even wear a mask in the store and get an attitude and want to cough on the employees' faces just because the employees are trying to enforce the policy that the store created at the advice of those up top who told us wear a mask. And so you're just seeing it. Or even teachers who, again, now you're forcing all the teachers back into the classroom because we need to open up the economy and America needs to do what it needs to do. You're not paying the teachers any hazard pay. You're not giving them a lot of the supplies that they need. They're still paying out of pocket for a lot of things. The children are all behind because school has pretty much been a crap session for the last year. And again, there's no empathy, there's no sympathy in this. Well, if they don't like it, they can quit. And so that's where we are. And it's just, it's so draining to watch. And that's why I'm like, I wish we could stop putting in so many of these kind of crooked politicians who, one, don't care about the people, but two, I wish people would stop voting against their own interests because they want to align with a party or they want to align with their race, because that's another conversation. There's a lot of poor white Americans who are voting against their own interests because at least at the end of the day, the one thing that they feel that they can have over other people is that at least they're not black, or at least they're not in the Latino community, or at least they can hold on to whiteness. So yeah, we'll go ahead and elect the white nationalist candidate because they're saying all the things we like to hear. Yeah, we're really going to give it to them. We're going to show them, we're going to own the libs or whoever else they got beef with. And so it's just like you just see the foolery. And I'm like, y'all keep putting in people who don't even have common sense. Marco Rubio, the same guy who let all the kids in his state get shot up at Parkland and then do nothing about it. Because again, the other part is a lot of these politicians are so bought out that, they'll run on hope and we're going to do this and do that. And then when they get in there, they can't even do anything because they need to pay back all of these people who have donated. And I'm not talking about mom and pop donations of $25. I'm talking about these corporations and companies that give them six-figure checks. And, I'm going to give you this check for $400,000. But please just remember, when it's time to vote on that bill that's going to say, there needs to be better emission standards, on the freeways or something, you just make sure to vote no because that's going to go against our company. Or, you just make sure that when it comes to kind of healthcare, you vote no on all of this because, as long as Big Pharma can get what they want, we'll be rich. So you just vote no on that and so on and so forth. And so it's just a joke all around. And I look at somebody like Rubio, I'm like, I knew he was stupid when he couldn't even drink that glass of water. You remember that speech where he was doing a speech and he wanted to get the glass of water, but he didn't want to stop looking at the camera. So and then he's over there reaching and I was like, what is wrong with him? And it's just like, you could have just went and grabbed the glass and came back and took a sip. Nobody was going to say anything, but now you look awkward and you look crazy. I mean, it's just like, y'all put anybody in office. But I want to jump into one last story, but this video is already so long. But we're going to keep going anyway. So, if your attention span is too short, you can always pause the video and come back to it another time or just stop watching. This clip of Rodney Reese with the police. One, I'm glad he's alive. But again, you just keep seeing the same pattern and it's killing me softly. Like, it really is. Like, you just keep seeing the same thing where all of a sudden somebody is suspicious, so the police feel warranted to go and harass or do whatever. But you see a cycle where a lot of times there's something foolish that happens, somebody ends up dying. People start asking questions. The police can't give you a real answer. There's all kind of, gray areas and stuff that's been covered up. And then it gets presented to the media. And because people already like to latch onto the idea of racism and whiteness and anti-blackness, of course, they go and vilify whoever is that victim and so on and so forth. The people get outraged. And before you can even get over that one, there's another situation where somebody else dies in another state and so on and so forth. And then by the time you get to the question of accountability, nobody gets charged. Or if they get charged, it's some low-grade charges that are going to, warrant, you going to jail for a year if you're convicted, because most of the time the grand jury is already not going to find an issue with what the police did, so all is fine. Or, if it does make it all the way to trial, they end up going and they get sentenced to a month in jail and a $2,000 fine. And as soon as they get out, they end up on another police force, they get promoted, and now they're doing the trainings. And so you just keep seeing the same cycle. Fortunately, in his situation, it didn't escalate to that. But if you saw the video, pretty much he's walking home from work. The police stop him because they're like, oh, you're walking in the street. Now, mind you, this is Texas during everything that had just happened in Texas with the storms and people have no power and so on and so forth. There's nobody in the road. And what I found interesting is I was watching some people defend the police like, oh, well, they're only doing what they're supposed to do. He was walking in the road with no t-shirt or with no coat on. He only had a t-shirt. And I was like, okay, and I'm sure for those of you who go to work at 5 in the morning, how many times do you see white folks in track shorts and a tank top going jogging at 9-degree weather? Like, relax. Like, it's the double standards. At this point, by the way, after what we saw on the 6th, I don't ever want to hear another conversation about the police not being able to refrain from violence, because we watched the police get slapped around on national TV for a few hours. So please, save it. But I think with going to Rodney Reese, I just feel like I see a cycle of so many things because there's other things that are happening. Like you saw that with Daniel Prude, the grand jury decided that the officers did nothing wrong. You know, this is a man who had no clothes on, sadly, but they pretty much had him pinned to the ground and mocked him as he died. You know, and so, you know, it is what it is with him. The grand jury has decided all is fine. And the police were within their rightful respective places. And then you saw the independent investigation in regards to Elijah McClain, where it was like, yes, the police were in the wrong. They shouldn't have stopped him. He hadn't done anything wrong. Not only that, and then when you have the first responders and everybody get there, they give and inject this kid with ketamine. And it's like, one, you don't even know his whole health record, like whether or not he's even allergic to something, and y'all just injected him with something, and then you have this kid die, who was minding his own business, just walking with his headphones, trying to live his best life. He's dead, and again, you still see the lack of empathy, and I think the saddest part with Elijah McClain is like, just knowing his story makes it so much sadder. It's just like, man, this is an evil world. And then again, today is what, the 1-year anniversary of Ahmaud Arbery's death as well, or in addition to that, I see that the family is filing a civil lawsuit or a wrongful death suit against that police department because they feel that the police were in cahoots with what happened. Because even with that situation, one of the guns that was found on the scene was the gun of one of the police officers. You know, even though he was shot with a shotgun, it just goes to show that, yes, they feel that, you know, the aggressors deputized the other people who were there to go and shoot and follow this guy. And it's just like, you see a lack of empathy. You see a lack of remorse. You see a lack of understanding of people's plight. And again, I just think with black skin in this country, you're not allowed to do anything. You know, when you're walking, you're going to get shot. When you're in your bed, you're going to get shot. You know, if you're on the way to work, you're going to get shot. And it's just like, it's absolutely crazy. And it's just like that you haven't seen a shift of anything change. That's what makes it crazy. Even after all of that marching and stuff that happened last summer, which is why I said don't get excited just because the officers took a knee or just because some of these politicians wore some kente cloth and took a knee. Let me see what the policy's doing. You know, let me see what the accountability is going to be. Let me see who's getting fired. Let me see which departments you're going to defund and restructure and rebuild or do whatever you need to do. Let me see what's going on with all of that. And so you've watched all of this symbolism happen in the summer of 2020 and, oh, we stand with these people and we're going to put black boxes in our Instagram. And yeah, I hear you. I hear you. We're going to have another conversation. Let's have a conversation. I was like, how many conversations are we going to be having, man? And so you had all these conversations and the symbolism and everybody singing along together and kumbaya, and pretty much every entertainer you can think of has come out with some kind of protest song. And then at the end of the day, here we are in 2021 with the same foolery. Ain't nothing changed. Nothing. Just some new faces in charge, but the same system. And so it's just like, it's so draining to follow sometimes. Like, it's just like, man. And there's like a lack of understanding. I always remember, I went to some like town hall thing one time. This is after somebody had been killed by police. There's been so many at this point, I can't remember who it was. And they had 4 different police departments that were supposed to talk to the people. Can I tell you that when this came out, and people thought it was going to be questions getting answered and, you know, some real conversations about, well, what are y'all gonna do in this department that no, it turned into, you had one department, this guy went up here and did a slideshow, and at the end of the slideshow he was like, police are victims too. I was like, what we're not gonna do is make the experience of a police officer and somebody who's unjustifiably killed and unarmed, we're not going to make those interchangeable because they're not equatable. We're not doing that. And then after he went, then there was another officer who goes, and he pretty much cussed all of us out because he was like, you know, we did a community day and we done went to the store and we done got hot dogs and ribs and ain't nobody show up. I'm like, are we living in the Twilight Zone? That is not the energy we need right now. Why would you think people want to come and eat your little raggedy hot dogs and y'all done shot and killed up everybody? That's not how this works. And even if that were the case, a barbecue and some basketball does not change the system. It doesn't change the policy. It doesn't change the practices. It doesn't change the norm. It does not go against the status quo. It's playing into the status quo to appease people to shut up temporarily while you continue the same foolishness. And so I'm over a lot of this. With Rodney Reese, they tried to charge him initially. The charges have been dropped because social media, of course, did its thing. Like, that's the other thing. It's almost like if it weren't for social media, half of the conversations around accountability would never take place. Because, again, you'd be in that same system. I think that's one of the reasons why when that video of Rodney King was released, it was finally like, people were like, finally, we've been telling y'all for years and years, and now it's in everybody's faces. But the sad part is, even as people see the foolery, even as people see the atrocities, they don't care. It is what it is. Because, again, people want to hold up the status quo. People automatically assume if you're black, you must be doing something wrong. You didn't comply. And there's all these different conversations. But like I said, again, I never want to hear any conversations about complying after we saw what happened on January 6th. I'm going to use that as a crutch in every argument. Because, again, on international TV, I watch people go and beat up police. Specifically white folks, lay out police and stab them with flag poles and slap them around and crush them in the doors and push through and knock folks over and everything and pepper spray the police. So I don't want to hear about police not being able to refrain. Okay? Save it. This whole system is just racist. It's some bull crap. You just get tired of it. Anyway, I've been on this video for way over my little time that I want to be on, so we're going to wrap it up. But, you know, share your 2 cents. I hope things can slowly work out. I need a change in all of the leadership. I want the country to free itself from the two-party system, and I feel like this whole system we're living under has to literally be dismantled in order to undo what's happening. All of this patchwork policy and all this patchwork type of stuff to fix problems that you can't fix with a patch. You know what I mean? It's a lot. Anyway, I'm out. Share your 2 cents. Subscribe.
But you just way too blind to see. Give